I never imagined my daughter would look at me the way she did that morning. Not with love, not with pride, but with something sharp, something that told me I was nothing more than an intruder in her perfect world. The church smelled of lilies and candle wax. The music swelled, filling the high ceiling with joy that wasn't mine to share. I slipped into the last pew, the faded blue dress clinging awkwardly to my body. I hadn't wanted to come, not after the words Hannah had said to me. "Don't come. You'll ruin it." They had been the last thing she spoke to me on the phone, her tone cold, final, as if I were a stranger begging for scraps of affection. But a mother is still a mother, no matter how unwanted. I thought foolishly that I could watch from the shadows, that I could keep my promise not to ruin anything. All I wanted was one glimpse of her happiness, one memory to hold when the house fell too quiet at night. She was radiant. I'll never deny that. Her gown shimmered under the stained glass, her hair twisted into a crown of curls, her smile glowing for the world to see. For a moment, just a fleeting one, I saw the child I had raised, the little girl who once ran through sprinklers, who clutched my hand in grocery lines, who whispered secrets into my shoulder. My Hannah, my baby. But then her eyes found me. It was like a blade sliding between my ribs. Her face, stiffened lips pressed tight. Her gaze burned. She didn't have to shout, though the words carried farther than she intended. "She doesn't belong here." The organ faltered mid-note. The bridesmaids glanced nervously. Guests shifted in their seats, craning their necks toward the back, where I sat shrinking smaller and smaller, wishing I could vanish into the wood of the pew. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks. My hands clutched the fabric of my purse until the seams ached. Around me, whispers began to swell. Not gasps, not outrage, just the rustling sound of people trying not to stare while staring all the same. It was humiliation, dressed in politeness. Hannah leaned toward the man beside her, Daniel, her groom. Her voice dropped sharp as a hiss, but the microphone on her chest betrayed her privacy. "Get her out." The air thickened. An usher stirred near the aisle, hesitating, uncertain. My first instinct was to stand, to run, to prove my daughter right that I didn't belong. My legs trembled, ready to carry me out before the eyes grew sharper, before the whispers grew crueler. But then something unexpected happened. Daniel stepped forward. His hand lifted slightly, stopping the music, stilling the movement of the usher. His eyes, kind, steady, yet clouded with something unspoken, fixed on me. Not with disgust, not with shame, with a strange intensity, as if he were trying to hold me in place. "Wait," he said. Just one word. But it cracked the air like thunder. The priest stammered, caught mid-prayer. The bridesmaids glanced at each other. Even Hannah froze her mouth half open in indignation. The guests fell into silence, every eye bouncing between the radiant bride, her furious expression, and the groom who had dared to interrupt his own ceremony. I sat paralyzed. My heart hammered in my chest so loudly I was certain the entire congregation could hear it. I didn't know whether to feel relieved or horrified. All I wanted was invisibility, but Daniel had pulled me into the center of the stage. He didn't look away. His jaw tightened, his voice clearer this time. "There's something I need to say." Hannah whipped her head toward him, eyes wide, cheeks burning. Her lips moved quickly, silent words only he could hear. Please threats I couldn't tell. He shook his head. A refusal. A stand. The hush that followed was heavier than any sound. Even the candles seemed to flicker slower, as if holding their breath. I wanted to disappear. I wanted to melt into the pew, to vanish before this became worse than it already was. But I couldn't move. My daughter's eyes still pierced me like daggers, but Daniel's gaze anchored me. It was as if he were silently telling me, "Don't leave." Not yet. For the first time in years, I wasn't sure whose daughter Hannah really was. The whispers died completely. The air itself seemed to wait. And then Daniel turned fully toward me, his face unreadable, but his voice calm, almost reverent. "She deserves to be here." The words hung in the vaulted ceiling, echoing off stone and glass. My breath caught my fingers going slack around my purse. A dozen emotions collided inside me: disbelief, shame, gratitude, terror. My daughter's wedding day had become something else entirely, and I had no idea whether I was about to be saved or sacrificed. The moment Daniel spoke, I felt the air in the church shift. She deserves to be here. The words echoed against the high stone walls, ringing louder than the organ ever had. I shrank into myself, heat flooding my face, yet I couldn't look away from him. I had never spoken more than a handful of words to Daniel. Our conversations had been limited to polite greetings at holidays, a few stilted calls where Hannah hovered in the background. He had always been kind enough but distant, almost formal. Yet here he was standing at the altar, stopping his own wedding to defend me. My daughter's face turned crimson. She hissed something sharp into his shoulder, words too soft for the guests, but plain enough to me. "Don't do this. Not today." Daniel shook his head. His voice steadied louder this time, carrying across the hushed pews. "This isn't just about today, Hannah. It's about the truth. And truth doesn't wait for a convenient moment." The congregation stirred. Chairs squeaked. Throats cleared nervously. Everyone had been expecting a fairy tale vow exchange. Instead, they were watching a battlefield unfold, one with me unwillingly placed in the middle. I wanted to stand to say something, anything to smooth it over, to remind him that this was their wedding day, not my stage. But my body wouldn't move. My heart hammered against my ribs. My knees felt weak. It was as if the years of silence, the years of swallowing my pain, had anchored me to that wooden pew. Hannah turned, her voice pitched louder now, breaking through the stunned stillness. "This isn't the time, Daniel. She was not invited for a reason." The words sliced through me. My hands trembled against the hem of my dress. She didn't even say my name. Not my mother, not Evelyn. Just she, as if I were a stranger, as if I were some shameful secret dragged into the light. I could hear the whispers beginning again, soft as leaves rustling in a restless wind. Not invited. Her own mother. Faces turned toward me, pity in some, curiosity in others. I kept my gaze locked on my lap, praying the ground would open and swallow me whole. But Daniel wouldn't let the moment pass. He took a step forward, breaking the invisible line between altar and audience. His voice rose clear, carrying weight. "Your mother deserves to be here, and everyone deserves to know why she wasn't." A gasp escaped someone near the front. My chest constricted, shame burning hotter. What was he doing? Why would he drag this out? Didn't he understand that the more he spoke, the deeper the wound became? Hannah clutched his arm nails, biting into the fabric of his sleeve. Her voice was shrill now, stripped of the polished grace she had perfected. "Daniel, stop. You'll embarrass me in front of everyone." Embarrass her. That word. It fell on me like a stone, heavier than all the rest. My daughter was ashamed of me, not just in whispers, not just in the secrecy of unmailed invitations, but in front of a church full of people. My throat ached. But Daniel's jaw clenched, his eyes flashing with something fierce. "The only embarrassment here," he said firmly, "is pretending your mother doesn't exist." The church fell silent again. No whispers this time, only the weight of his words pressing down on every soul in the room. Even the priest looked uncertain, glancing between the couple with furrowed brows. I sat frozen, unable to move, unable to breathe. My daughter's entire world was unraveling in front of me, and somehow I was both the cause and the bystander. Margaret Daniel's mother shifted in the front pew. She leaned slightly toward Hannah, her gloved hand brushing against her daughter-in-law-to-be. Her lips moved, whispering something only Hannah could hear. Hannah's back straightened, her chin tilted defiantly, though her cheeks still burned. Margaret's eyes flicked toward me, cool and assessing. I had seen that look before. Women like her wore it often. The kind of gaze that sized you up, weighed your worth, and dismissed you in the same heartbeat. Hannah lifted her voice again, steadier now, as if Margaret's presence had stiffened her spine. "She doesn't belong here, Daniel. You don't understand what she's like, the things she's done." The words stung, though I didn't know what she meant. What had I done other than work myself into exhaustion to keep her fed and clothed? What had I done other than give every piece of myself so she could stand in this very place, in that beautiful dress, marrying into a life I never had? Daniel looked at her, then at me. His voice softened, but it carried still. "I know what she's done, Hannah. I've seen the evidence with my own eyes. But the question isn't about her past. It's about your lies." The room buzzed with low murmurs. Heads tilted, curiosity sharpened. Hannah's lips parted, her words faltering. What "What are you talking about?" she demanded, her voice shaking now. Daniel took a slow breath, his hand lowered, steadying himself. "You told me your mother was gone, that she had died years ago, that she never cared for you." Gasps spread through the church, louder this time, impossible to muffle. The pews rippled with disbelief. People turned toward me again, some eyes wide, some narrowed with judgment. My stomach dropped. The blood drained from my face. Dead. My daughter had told him I was dead. I pressed my hand against my chest, my breath shallow. My eyes met Hannah's, and for a split second I thought I saw fear there. Not shame, not anger, fear. The priest shifted uncomfortably, closing his book. One of the bridesmaids whispered furiously to another. The groomsmen shifted their feet, caught in the storm but unable to move. I sat still, the world tilting beneath me. I had thought nothing could hurt more than being uninvited, more than being told I would ruin her day. But this was worse. My own daughter had buried me alive in her stories. The words clanged in my ears long after they left Daniel's mouth. "You told me your mother was dead." The guests stirred like restless waves. The low rumble of whispers filled the church, some sharp with disbelief, others coated in pity. My stomach twisted. I couldn't lift my head. I stared down at my hands, knuckles white against the fading leather of my purse. Dead. My daughter had told her fiancé I was dead. For a moment I wasn't in the church anymore. I was back in the kitchen of our old house, Hannah at the table doing her homework while I scrubbed the counters. She had looked up at me, then her eyes soft, asking if I'd ever leave her. I'd promised I never would. The memory burned, now cruel in its innocence. When I forced myself to look up, Hannah was trembling, her perfect composure cracking under the weight of the lie. Her eyes darted to Margaret, who sat stiff as stone, lips tight, as if daring her daughter-in-law to deny it. Hannah's voice wavered, but she tried to recover. "That's not true. He's twisting it. I only meant—" She faltered, her words tangling. The congregation leaned forward, waiting, hungry for clarity. Daniel's voice rang clear. "You told me she was gone, that she never raised you, that you were on your own." His eyes cut to me, then back to Hannah. But that wasn't the truth, was it? The weight of his stare pinned her. My daughter, standing in her white gown, looked cornered. I wanted to run to her, to smooth her hair, to whisper that she didn't have to lie anymore. But the part of me that had bled for years whispered back, "She chose this. She buried you alive." Hannah's voice rose desperate now. "You don't understand. You don't know what it was like. She wasn't a real mother." Her eyes flicked toward me, filled with fury, not fear. "She ruined everything. She made me feel small, ashamed. I couldn't let you think I came from nothing." The words hit harder than a slap. Small, ashamed, nothing. My breath caught in my throat. I had worked myself raw to make sure she had food, that her shoes weren't too tight, that she had a future I couldn't imagine for myself. And to her it wasn't love. It was shame. Daniel's jaw tightened. "She may not be perfect. No parent is. But she is your mother. And lying about her. Lying that she was dead." His voice cracked with disbelief. "That's not protecting yourself. That's erasing her." The silence after his words was thick, suffocating. The priest shifted uncomfortably, clearing his throat, but saying nothing. One of the bridesmaids dabbed her eyes, mascara smudging. I wanted to disappear. I wanted to tell them all to stop. But for the first time, I saw something flicker in the crowd, not pity this time, but recognition. The way some guests looked at me, nodding slightly as if to say, "We see you. We know what you carried." Hannah turned to them, desperation clawing at her words. "You don't understand. She made everything harder. She was always embarrassing me. I had to hide her. I had to—" Her voice cracked, rising too high, too brittle. The polished bride everyone admired fractured before their eyes. I felt the room tilt. Whispers spread again, sharper now. Not just whispers of disbelief, whispers of judgment. Margaret's voice finally slipped into the open, smooth and sharp. "Hannah, enough." She leaned forward, her pearls catching the light. "Control yourself." But Hannah was unraveling. She stamped her foot, the sound jarring against the marble floor. "No. They don't know what it was like to grow up with her. Everyone thought we were normal, but we weren't. She Her words trailed, choking on themselves. Daniel stepped closer to her, his voice low but carrying. Hannah, the only thing they see right now is a woman ashamed of the one person who gave her life. He turned to the congregation, his tone steady. This isn't just about today. This is about honesty. About the vows we were about to take. If we can't start with the truth, then what are we even doing here? The words cut the silence like glass. Gasps broke again, but not many this time, mostly a restless, shifting unease, as though the entire room knew something irreversible had just begun. I gripped the pew tighter, my knees weak. My heart was torn in two: pride that someone had finally spoken for me, and agony that it had to be my daughter's groom. Hannah's eyes darted wildly, her face pale beneath the layers of makeup. She looked at me, her voice a dagger. "You couldn't even stay away. You had to ruin everything, didn't you?" Her accusation pierced through me. Maybe she believed it. Maybe in her heart she truly thought my presence had destroyed her, but I knew the truth. I hadn't ruined this moment. Her lies had. The congregation sat in brittle silence, the weight of secrets pressing down. Daniel's hand shook slightly, but his voice was firm. "This wedding cannot continue on lies." He turned to Hannah, his eyes soft with pain. "Tell them the truth." The silence that followed was unbearable. Hannah's lips parted, but no words came. She stood frozen, her gown gleaming under the stained glass, her hands trembling at her sides. The guests waited. I waited. Daniel waited. But Hannah said nothing. The silence was her confession. Her silence stretched on too long. The kind of silence that grows heavier the longer it lingers until it becomes unbearable. The congregation shifted uncomfortably, the scrape of shoes and the rustle of dresses echoing through the church. My heart pounded in my ears. I could feel every stare, hot and unforgiving, though none of them knew what to do with me. And then Hannah broke. "You don't get it." She snapped, her voice rising so sharply it startled the bridesmaids beside her. Her mask cracked, her carefully painted smile gone, her voice raw with fury. "You don't know what she's really like. She's not some saint. She choked on her words, her hands trembling, clutching the folds of her gown like a lifeline. I flinched. Every syllable hit like a lash. I wanted to tell her to stop, to breathe, to remember where she was. But the venom in her tone told me this wasn't just a slip. It was everything she had buried finally spewing out. Daniel stood firm, his face taut, his voice low but cutting. "What is she, Hannah? Tell them. Tell me." Hannah's eyes darted to Margaret as if begging for rescue. Margaret leaned forward in the front pew, her pearl necklace gleaming, her lips curling into the faintest whisper. "Compose yourself." But Hannah couldn't. She was unraveling faster than anyone could stop her. She ruined everything, Hannah spat. "When I was growing up, she embarrassed me. She worked those stupid jobs, she made us look poor, Her voice cracked. "I didn't want anyone to know where I came from. So yes, I told you she was dead, because it was easier than telling the truth." A ripple of gasps moved through the church, not the startled kind, but the disbelieving, condemning kind. Even from the back row, I could feel the judgment falling on her like stones. My hands shook. I wanted to hide my face, but my body stayed rigid. Easier than telling the truth. My throat tightened as tears burned behind my eyes. All those years of selling my jewelry, of patching her school uniforms so she wouldn't stand out of going without food, so she never had to, all of it to her was shame. A past so shameful, she preferred to bury me as dead rather than admit I was alive. Daniel's voice boomed, breaking through my thoughts. "Easier, Hannah, lies are never easier. They just rot everything around them." He turned toward the guests, now his tone steady, commanding. "This woman, Evelyn, she isn't some ghost from Hannah's past. She is her mother. She worked, she sacrificed, she gave everything. And Hannah wanted to erase her." His words sent another ripple through the pews. This time I saw heads nod. A few guests glanced at me with wide eyes, their expressions softening, but others shook their heads, stunned that a bride would confess such a thing on her wedding day. Hannah's face flushed crimson. She stepped down from the altar, her heels clacking against the marble, her gown swishing violently. She stopped in front of me, her chest heaving. Her eyes burned into mine, full of accusation. "You shouldn't have come," she hissed loud enough for the entire church to hear. "I told you not to. But you couldn't resist, could you? You had to come and ruin this too." the words sliced deeper than any knife. I felt every gaze tighten on me, as though I were guilty of some unforgivable crime. My lips parted, but nothing came out. I had no defense. All I had was the truth that no one seemed ready to hear. I came because I loved her, because I couldn't let my daughter walk into a future while pretending her past didn't exist. Daniel moved quickly, stepping between us, his hand outstretched to hold Hannah back. His voice shook with restrained anger. "Enough! Don't you dare blame her for this. This isn't her doing, Hannah. It's yours." The room froze. For the first time, Hannah looked small. The towering figure in white, the bride who had orchestrated every detail, suddenly looked like a child caught in a storm she couldn't control. Her lips trembled, her hands clutching her dress tighter. Daniel's other hand slid into his jacket. He pulled out a thin envelope worn at the edges. My breath caught. I recognized it instantly. It was the letter I had written to Hannah years ago, tucked away in a box of old belongings, begging her forgiveness for missing one of her school plays because I was working a double shift. I had poured my heart into those pages, never knowing if she had read them. Daniel held it up, his voice firm. "I found this. And others. Letters, notes, scraps of proof that Evelyn was there. Always there. You told me she abandoned you. But the truth is, she never stopped fighting for you." My chest constricted. My letters. He had them. He had read them. The thought was both mortifying and relieving, like having my soul exposed in front of strangers, but finally being believed. Hannah's face twisted rage and panic mingling. "You had no right," she shrieked, her voice breaking into a sob. "You went through my things. That wasn't for you." Daniel didn't flinch. His voice stayed calm, deliberate. "I had every right, Hannah, because I was marrying you. I needed to know who you were. And what I found was not the woman I thought I knew." The crowd stirred again, whispers swelling. This time not against me, but against her. Margaret's face remained stone, but I saw the faintest flicker in her eyes. A crack. She hadn't expected this either. I sat frozen, trembling, unable to process it all. My daughter's lies spilling out my sacrifices exposed Daniel standing like a shield before me. And yet instead of relief, I felt something else creep in. Fear. Because this was only the beginning. The silence that followed Daniel's words didn't last long. It cracked open into murmurs, a wave of hushed voices rolling across the pews. Some leaned into their neighbors, whispering furiously. Others shook their heads in disbelief. The sound was soft, but it filled the church like a swarm of bees, restless and sharp. Every face seemed to glance toward me, even those who tried to look away quickly. Their pity was worse than their judgment. I kept my eyes fixed on my lap, my fingers trembling against the frayed leather of my purse. My entire life had been reduced to whispers. They didn't invite her. Her own mother dead. She told him she was dead. The words floated poisonous, just loud enough to sting. Hannah's cheeks were blotched red, her breath ragged. She stood on the marble floor like a child caught in a lie, but too stubborn to back down. "You don't know what she's like," she shouted suddenly, her voice too loud, too brittle. She wasn't some loving, perfect mother. She made things harder, always harder. Her words echoed through the vaulted ceiling. Guests shifted again, some whispering more harshly now, others watching her with open disapproval. I wanted to tell her to stop, to breathe, to remember where she was, but my throat was locked. All I could do was sit there, my heart twisting tighter and tighter. Daniel's voice cut through the noise, calm, steady. "No one said she was perfect, Hannah. But she was here. She worked. She sacrificed. And you lied about her. That's the truth." Hannah's lips trembled. Her eyes darted desperately to the front pew. Margaret leaned forward, her gloved hand brushing against Hannah's arm. Her voice was low, but I caught it the smooth, cutting whisper of someone used to control. "Enough. Don't give them more." Hannah stiffened, her jaw tightening. She swallowed, turned back toward the crowd, and straightened her spine. But the damage had already been done. The cracks in her perfect bride mask were too visible, too deep. Daniel turned his gaze back to the guests, his voice clear. "She told me her mother was gone, that she had no family. And I believed her. I believed the lie because I trusted her. But that lie ends here." The murmurs grew louder, some voices rising in outrage, others in disbelief. One older woman shook her head, muttering, "How could a daughter do that?" Another man leaned forward, whispering, "No wonder he looks angry." I wanted to crawl into the pew to vanish into the shadows. Every word, every whisper felt like a stone thrown at me, even when they weren't meant for me at all. Hannah's voice broke through the noise, high-pitched and desperate. She ruined everything for me growing up. We never had money, never had what other kids had. I was always the one left out. Do you know what that feels like? To be embarrassed by your own mother? Her words were knives. My chest constricted. Each memory, she twisted, replaying in my mind, nights when the fridge was nearly empty. Mornings I sent her to school in hand-me-down shoes I had patched until my fingers bled. I hadn't meant to embarrass her. I had meant to keep her alive. The murmurs shifted, some guests frowning at me, now their eyes heavy with pity or judgment I couldn't untangle. My stomach churned. It felt like standing trial without ever being asked to speak. Daniel reached for Hannah's arm gently but firmly, pulling her back from where she had drifted toward me. His voice was sharper now. "You were embarrassed by sacrifice, by love. That says more about you than it does about her." The pews stirred again, some nodding quietly. Hannah yanked her arm free, glaring at him, her voice cracking. "Stop humiliating me. This is supposed to be my day." Daniel's voice dropped low, but it carried through the stillness. "It was supposed to be our day. But lies don't build a marriage, Hannah. They destroy it." The church fell quiet again, uneasy. The whispers died down, replaced by something worse. A silence thick with judgment, with people waiting, watching. I felt it pressing down on me. My chest tightened, my palms damp. I had become the center of a spectacle I never asked for. Margaret leaned closer to Hannah, her lips brushing her ear, whispering something I couldn't hear. Whatever it was, Hannah's face stiffened, her mouth snapping shut. She turned her head sharply, refusing to look at me. The silence lingered. Heavy, accusing. I wanted to say something to defend myself, to defend her, but my lips wouldn't move. My voice had been silent for so long it no longer knew how to rise. Daniel turned his shoulders tight, his eyes scanning the room. He didn't speak again. Not yet. He let the silence hang as if daring Hannah to fill it. But she didn't. And in that suffocating stillness, with whispers still echoing faintly at the edges of the church, I realized something bitter and undeniable. I wasn't just here as a mother. I was here as evidence. Evidence of what she wanted to erase. Evidence of what she couldn't escape. And whether I spoke or not, I was the living truth Hannah had spent years trying to bury. The silence pressed in until I thought I might suffocate beneath it. My lungs felt tight, my throat raw, though I hadn't spoken a word. Every eye in the church weighed on me, as if I were both the cause of the chaos and its proof. And then Hannah moved. Her heels struck hard against the marble as she stormed down the aisle, the white folds of her gown snapping behind her like a banner of fury. She stopped in front of me, her shadow falling over my pew. Her voice cut like broken glass, sharp and loud enough for all to hear. "I told you not to come," she spat. "I told you this wasn't your place." I looked up at her, at my daughter, whose eyes once sparkled with trust, now blazing with anger. My lips trembled, the words barely slipping out. "I only wanted to see you happy." Her face twisted, her hands fisting at her sides. "Happy. You ruin everything you touch. You ruined me, and now you're ruining this." The words sliced deeper than anything she had ever said to me. My chest ached, my hands shaking so badly I clutched the pew just to stay upright. Before I could respond, Daniel appeared at her side. His hand caught her arm, firm but gentle, pulling her back a step. His voice rang through the church loud, commanding, no longer soft. "Enough." The single word cracked like thunder. The congregation hushed instantly. Even Hannah froze her chest, heaving, her lips parted, as if ready to hurl another accusation, but caught by the weight in his tone. Daniel's eyes swept the room, then settled on her. "This marriage cannot begin on lies," he said, his voice trembling with restrained anger. "Not on shame, not on erasing the woman who gave you life." Hannah shook her head violently, her curls flying. "You don't know what she was like. You don't know what I went through because of her. Always working, always tired, never enough. She was a burden, not a mother." The words burned into me, searing like fire. A burden. That's what I had been to her. Not the woman who worked 2 jobs, who skipped meals so she could eat, who stitched holes in her shoes under the dim light of midnight. A burden. Daniel's jaw tightened. His hand slid into his jacket pocket, and when it emerged, he held a thin envelope. I recognized it instantly. My breath hitched. It was the envelope I had sealed years ago. My handwriting faded, the corners worn. A letter I had written to Hannah after missing her middle school recital, a night I had cried in the back room of the diner while balancing 2 shifts just to pay our rent. I had apologized, begged her forgiveness, told her how proud I was of her. I never knew if she read it. Daniel held it up for all to see, his voice steady but heavy with emotion. You told me she abandoned you, that she never cared. But I found this, and there are others. He looked around at the guests, then back at Hannah. Letters, notes, proof. She was there, always there, even when it broke her. Gasps rippled across the pews. A few people leaned forward, squinting to see the envelope. Whispers started up again, but different now, curious, sympathetic, disbelieving of Hannah rather than me. My cheeks burned. My private words never meant for strangers hung in the air like fragile glass about to shatter. Yet beneath the embarrassment, a flicker of something warm stirred. Vindication. Someone had seen my love. Someone believed it. Hannah's face drained of color. She lunged for the envelope, but Daniel pulled it back out of her reach. Her voice cracked with fury. You had no right. You went through my things. That wasn't yours to show. Daniel didn't flinch. His voice sharpened. I had every right, because I was going to marry you. I needed to know who you were. And this, he lifted the letter higher, his eyes cutting into hers. This is who your mother was, not the ghost you invented, not the shame you painted her as. This. The church erupted again. Whispers, murmurs. A few people shaking their heads at Hannah, others looking at me with wide, softened eyes. Hannah's lips trembled, tears threatening her mascara. She glared at me, her voice breaking into a sob. You shouldn't have come. If you'd stayed away, none of this would have happened. Her words hit me like a blow, but Daniel's voice rose above them, clear and fierce. No, Hannah. If she had stayed away, the lie would have lived on. And I will not marry a lie. The church stilled the words reverberating through its walls. I sat frozen, my heart pounding, my tears spilling silently down my cheeks. The day I thought would be Hannah's happiest was splitting open before my eyes, and I wasn't sure if it was the beginning of her end or mine. For a long moment, no one moved. The letter hung in Daniel's hand like a weapon, Hannah's face pale, her breath ragged. My own tears blurred the edges of the church candlelight, smearing into streaks of white. And then Margaret rose. She had been sitting like stone in the front pew, her hands folded neatly in her lap, pearls resting at the base of her throat. Now as she stood, the subtle click of her heels echoed against the marble, slicing through the suffocating silence. Every eye turned to her. Her voice was honey at first, smooth, polished. Daniel, she began softly, this is not the time for family grievances. A wedding is meant to unite, not to air dirty laundry. Put the letter away. Let it go. But I saw it, the faintest curl at the corner of her lips, the glint in her eyes. It wasn't concern for her son, nor pity for me. It was control. She wanted this silence not for peace, but for image. Daniel turned toward her, his jaw set. Mother, with respect, I won't start a marriage built on lies. Margaret's smile didn't waver, though her voice sharpened. All families have secrets. We don't shout them in churches. If Evelyn wasn't invited, perhaps there was a reason. She tilted her head, eyes flicking to me with the faintest sneer. Some people bring shame wherever they go. The words stung, though I had heard worse. I had lived my life under those silent judgments, neighbors whispering about my late bills, co-workers smirking at my worn shoes, women like Margaret raising their brows at the sight of me. But hearing it now in this church in front of my daughter, it cut deep. Daniel's face flushed, his hand tightening around the letter. His voice rose firm, unwavering. Don't you dare. He turned fully to her, his tone sharper than I'd ever heard. Don't you dare speak about her that way. A ripple went through the pews. People shifted, shocked, not by Margaret's cruelty, but by Daniel's snapping back. A son challenging his mother in front of everyone. Margaret's smile faltered just slightly. Her eyes narrowed. "I am trying to protect you," she said coolly. "You're humiliating yourself, Daniel. Your bride is being torn apart. Your guests are restless. Stop this before you destroy everything." But Daniel shook his head. His voice trembled with emotion, but he didn't bend. What destroys a marriage isn't truth. It's lies. And if Hannah built this union by burying her mother, then maybe it was never meant to stand. The church fell still again. Hannah's sobs broke the silence, thin and frantic. She turned to Margaret, her voice trembling like a child's. "Say something. Tell him. Tell them. She doesn't matter." Margaret's lips parted, ready to soothe or scold. I couldn't tell. But in that instant I saw her clearly. For years I had wondered where Hannah's shame came from. It hadn't grown overnight. It hadn't come solely from her own pride. And as Margaret's cold eyes swept over me, I understood she had fed it. She had planted seeds in Hannah's heart, whispering that wealth was worth more than sacrifice, that appearances mattered more than blood. And Hannah had listened. My chest ached, my breath shallow. For the first time, I didn't just feel my daughter's rejection. I saw the shadow behind it. Margaret had wanted me erased because she knew my existence didn't fit her image of a perfect, polished family. And Hannah, desperate for acceptance, had obeyed. Daniel must have seen it too, because his words turned sharp, his voice shaking with anger. "You taught her this, didn't you? You taught her to be ashamed of the very person who gave her life." Margaret gasped, her composure cracking. "How dare you?" "No!" Daniel's voice thundered through the church, silencing even the whispers. "How dare you sit there and pretend you're protecting me when all you've done is poison her against the one person who loved her first?" The guests stared wide-eyed, some whispering Margaret's name in disbelief. She had built her reputation on refinement, control, respectability, and now her mask slipped, her influence laid bare. I sat frozen, my heart a storm. For years I had thought Hannah's rejection was mine alone to bear, that her shame was my fault. But as Margaret's icy glare met mine, I knew better. This woman had been pulling strings, weaving shame into Hannah's heart until it strangled her. Hannah clutched at her gown, sobbing harder now, torn between the two voices in her life, the mother who had raised her and the mother-in-law who had reshaped her. And in that moment I realized something I hadn't felt in years. I was not the weakest person in this room anymore. The church was so still, it felt like the air itself had thickened. No more whispers, no more rustling dresses, just silence, heavy, suffocating silence. I sat frozen in the pew, my heart pounding, the sound of it loud in my ears. Hannah stood a few feet away, her gown gleaming under the stained glass, her cheeks streaked with angry tears. Margaret was rigid in the front row, her lips pressed into a hard line. And Daniel's voice broke through that silence like a blade. He looked straight at Hannah, his face pale but resolute. "Tell me," he said, his voice low but carrying. "Are you ashamed of your mother?" The question echoed through the vaulted ceiling. Simple words, but they landed like a hammer. Hannah's eyes widened. She opened her mouth, but no words came. Her chest rose and fell quickly, her breath ragged. She looked at me, then at Margaret, then at the crowd. Her lips trembled, but she stayed silent. The silence stretched. I wanted to reach for her, to plead with her to say no, to say she wasn't ashamed, that all of this had been a misunderstanding. My fingers curled against the pew, aching to move, but I couldn't. I knew the truth already. Her silence was her answer. The guests shifted uncomfortably. A man in the second row coughed softly, his eyes darting between us. A bridesmaid dabbed her tears, shaking her head. The groomsmen stood stiff as statues, their faces grim. And me? My chest ached. My throat burned. I felt as though I'd been cut open, every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every ache in my bones laid bare for strangers to see. I had worked myself raw for a child who now stood silent rather than claim me as hers. Daniel didn't flinch. He repeated the question louder this time. "Hannah, answer me. Are you ashamed of her?" Her lips parted again, but no sound came. Her silence screamed louder than any denial. The congregation began to murmur softly, but the sound wasn't frantic now. It was disapproving. Shaking heads, clicks of tongues, whispers of judgment that swirled like smoke. She can't even say no. Her own mother. What kind of daughter? The words seeped into me, but for the first time they weren't directed at me. They were directed at her. I should have felt vindicated, but instead, I felt hollow, empty. Because even as the truth surfaced, it didn't fill the years of silence, the years of pain. Nothing could. Hannah's hands shook at her sides. Her voice cracked finally, but it was only a whisper. "You don't understand." Daniel's eyes softened, but his voice stayed steady. "Then help me. Help us. Say it. Say you are not ashamed of her." Her silence hung again. Her shoulders sagged. She looked down at the marble floor, her tears dripping onto the white silk of her gown. I realized then that the shame she carried was bigger than me, bigger than us. It was something that had grown inside her, watered by Margaret's words, fed by her own pride. It had taken root so deep that she couldn't tear it out, not even here, not even now. The priest shifted uncomfortably, glancing between the couple as though unsure whether to step in. But Daniel didn't let him. He stood tall, his hand clenched tightly around the envelope of my letters. His voice cracked with pain, but not hesitation. "Your silence is the answer, Hannah, and it tells me everything." Gasps fluttered again, but soft this time, resigned. The congregation seemed to understand that something had broken that could never be mended. My heart sank lower, heavier. Tears slipped silently down my cheeks. For years I had prayed for reconciliation, for a moment where Hannah might look at me and see not shame, but love. But here in this church, she had chosen silence. I felt both destroyed and strangely steady. The shame was no longer mine to carry. It was hers. Hannah's shoulders quivered, her face contorted in anguish, but no words came. She couldn't say it. She couldn't give me back even the smallest piece of dignity in front of these people. Daniel's voice dropped low, almost a whisper, but the quiet church carried it clearly. "I can't marry someone who denies her own mother." The words settled into the silence like stones dropping into water. Ripples of whispers followed, but I heard none of them. My ears rang, my chest hollow. For years I had begged silently in my heart for Hannah to acknowledge me, and here at the very altar where she was to begin her new life, she refused. Her silence was her confession, and it was the cruelest answer of all. For a moment the silence felt endless. It wrapped itself around the pews like a heavy shroud, suffocating final. Hannah's silence had been her confession, but it left me hollow, as though the ground beneath me had given way. And then a sound broke through. The creak of wood as someone rose from a pew. At first I thought it was another guest leaving in discomfort, unwilling to watch this wedding disintegrate. But when I lifted my eyes, I saw her. Mrs. Callahan. An old neighbor, her hair now silver, but her back still straight, standing tall at the far end of the aisle. She had lived 3 doors down from us for years, watching me struggle with bags of groceries, seeing Hannah walk to school in hand-me-down coats. I hadn't known she was here today. Her voice, though older, was clear. That woman she pointed toward me worked harder than anyone I ever knew. The congregation shifted heads, turning toward her. She raised that girl by herself. I saw it with my own eyes. I saw her walk to the bus stop at 4 a.m. for a cleaning job, then come back in the afternoon to head to the diner. I saw her patch Hannah's shoes at night when she thought no one was looking. I saw her sell her wedding ring to pay the heating bill in January. My breath caught in my throat. The memories she spoke of flooded back in painful flashes, my fingers red and raw from scrubbing the hunger gnawing in my stomach when I gave Hannah my dinner, the hollow spot on my hand where my ring once sat. Mrs. Callahan's voice trembled, but it didn't falter. And never once did I hear her complain. Not once. She didn't have much, but she gave everything she had to that child. She turned her gaze directly on Hannah. "So for you to stand there and pretend she wasn't there, that she was dead, shame on you." The words rang out louder than any bell. Gasps filled the church, but these weren't for me now. They were for Hannah. For the bride who stood silent, her mascara streaked her shoulders, shaking, confronted not just by her groom or her mother, but by a witness no one could dismiss. My chest heaved. Tears slipped down my cheeks, hot and unstoppable. For the first time, someone other than me was speaking my truth. For the first time, I wasn't alone. Daniel turned toward Mrs. Callahan, his voice soft but steady. "Thank you." He looked back at Hannah, his expression a mixture of pain and disappointment. "There it is. Not from me, not from your mother, from someone who watched it all. Are you still going to deny it?" Hannah shook her head violently, her words tumbling out in broken sobs. You don't understand. You don't know what it was like to feel different from everyone else, to be the girl with the poor mother, the patched shoes. I hated it. I hated her for it. The congregation stirred again, but this time I felt the tide shift fully. The pity was gone. The whispers turned sharp, disapproving, ungrateful, spoiled. How could she? Hannah's sobs grew louder, frantic, but her words rang hollow. No one looked at her with sympathy anymore. They looked at me. And for once their eyes didn't burn. They softened. I saw recognition, understanding, even admiration flicker in some of their faces. The burden I had carried in silence for decades was no longer invisible. It was laid bare in front of everyone. I gripped the pew for balance, overwhelmed. My body shook with a strange mix of exhaustion and relief. Mrs. Callahan had spoken the words I never could. She had reminded the world and my daughter that I wasn't nothing. Daniel stepped forward again, his voice heavy with finality. You see, Hannah, love doesn't erase hardship. It endures it. Your mother endured more than most, and instead of honoring her, you erased her. That isn't strength. That's cruelty. Margaret shifted in the front pew, her lips pressed tight, her composure cracking. She didn't rise this time. She didn't dare. The whispers around her told me she knew her reputation was slipping too. Hannah clutched at her gown, her sobs spilling out like broken glass. Stop. Stop looking at me like that. You don't know what it felt like to grow up being ashamed. Her words echoed, but no one nodded in agreement. No one softened. The weight of the room had turned. For the first time in years, I wasn't invisible. I wasn't erased. I was seen. Daniel turned toward me, then his voice quieter meant only for me, though the silence of the church carried it to everyone. She should have been proud. And I'm sorry she wasn't. My lips parted, but no words came. Tears streamed freely down my cheeks. I had never needed an apology from him, but hearing someone acknowledge the truth felt like a balm on a wound I had stopped hoping would heal. The church buzzed again, restless, the weight of judgment pressing not on me, but on the bride in white, the daughter who had chosen silence. And I sat there trembling, realizing the tide had shifted completely. For the first time in this nightmare of a day, I wasn't the one on trial. The church was buzzing now, not with excitement, but with outrage. The whispers were sharp-cutting, as though each one sliced deeper into the fabric of Hannah's white gown. I sat trembling, my eyes locked on Daniel. His face was pale, strained, but his stance was steady. He clutched the envelope of letters in one hand, his jaw tight, his gaze fixed on the woman who stood sobbing in front of him. He spoke softly at first, but the quiet of the church carried every syllable. Hannah. He said, I loved you because I believed you were honest with me, because I thought I knew you. But what I see now, what everyone sees now, is someone who would erase her own mother for convenience. Hannah's sobs grew louder, her body trembling. You don't understand. You don't know what it was like growing up ashamed, always feeling less than. Daniel's voice cut through firmer this time. Then say it now. Say you're not ashamed of her. Say she matters to you. The words struck like stones. My chest tightened. I looked at Hannah, my daughter, my baby, her face twisted with desperation. I silently begged her to take the lifeline he offered. Just 3 words. She matters to me. But Hannah shook her head violently, her voice cracking. She doesn't matter. She never mattered. She's nothing to me. The words rang in my ears louder than any organ or hymn. My body felt hollow. The breath ripped from me. After all the years, all the nights I held her, as she cried, all the sacrifices I made quietly in the dark, she still chose to bury me. Not just in her lies, but in her truth. The congregation gasped audibly, the sharp intake of air rising like a wave. A bridesmaid covered her mouth. A groomsman muttered under his breath. The priest closed his eyes, his hands gripping the book tighter. Daniel's face crumpled, anguish flickering across it. His hand shook, but his voice was firm. Then I can't marry you. Hannah's head snapped toward him, her eyes wild. What? No, you don't mean that. She grabbed his arm, clutching desperately, her mascara streaking down her cheeks. You can't just leave me here. This is our wedding day. Daniel looked at her with pain so deep I almost pitied him. His voice was soft, broken. This was supposed to be our wedding day, but I won't marry someone who denies her own blood. And then slowly he lifted his hand to his chest. He pulled the ring free. The church erupted. Gasps, whispers, the scrape of chairs, as guests leaned forward watching the moment unravel. The glint of the ring caught in the candlelight as Daniel held it between his fingers. Hannah shook her head furiously, her sobs turning to screams. "No, you can't do this. You love me. You promised me." Daniel's voice cracked. "I promised to love the woman I thought you were. But lies don't build love. They destroy it." He dropped the ring into his pocket. The sound was soft, but it echoed like thunder in my chest. Hannah collapsed against him, clawing at his arm, but he stepped back. Her gown pooled around her white silk, stained with her tears and streaks of makeup. I sat in the pew, trembling, my hands pressed against my mouth. I should have felt vindicated. I should have felt justice. But all I felt was devastation, because the man who had loved my daughter was now leaving her not because of me, but because of the lies she had wrapped around herself. The congregation sat in stunned silence. Some shook their heads, others whispered angrily. A few women dabbed their eyes, their gazes flicking toward me with pity. Daniel turned to me, then just for a moment, his eyes softened, heavy with sorrow. "I'm sorry," he whispered. I swallowed hard, my throat burning. I wanted to speak, but no words came. My voice had been locked away too long. Hannah's sobs filled the church, loud, broken, desperate. She screamed again, her voice hoarse. "This is your fault." Her finger jabbed toward me, her eyes wild. "You came here and ruined everything. If you had stayed away, none of this would have happened." The congregation gasped again, some muttering disapproval. But Daniel shook his head firmly, his voice like steel. "No, Hannah. If she had stayed away, the truth would have stayed buried. But you buried it, not her. This isn't her fault. It's yours." The words hung heavy, undeniable. Hannah crumpled against the altar, her sobs echoing through the church. The perfect bride was gone. In her place was a broken woman undone by her own silence, her own cruelty. And me, I sat there numb, my heart torn open, my tears spilling silently. For years I had longed for my daughter to see me, and now she had not with love, not with forgiveness, but with hatred. The truth was out, the lie was shattered, but it had cost her everything, and I didn't know whether to grieve for myself or for her. Total word count: 1174. Pacing: abrupt, intense. Emotion: devastation, release, bitter vindication. Continuity. Log: Daniel gives Hannah one last chance to honor her mother. She refuses, screaming, "Evelyn is nothing." Daniel removes the ring, ending the wedding. Evelyn feels devastated rather than triumphant, mourning the daughter she has lost to shame. For so long I had sat silent. Silent through the years when Hannah's words cut sharper than knives. Silent when neighbors whispered about my worn clothes and past due bills. Silent now in this church as my daughter's wedding crumbled around us. But something shifted inside me. Maybe it was the way Daniel's words rang in the air, firm and final. Maybe it was the way the congregation's stares softened when they looked at me, no longer pitying, but recognizing. Or maybe it was because Hannah's voice, shrill and desperate, had placed the blame squarely on my shoulders yet again. I couldn't stay silent anymore. My hands trembled as I pushed myself to my feet. My knees wobbled, the old wooden pew creaking behind me. The sound echoed through the silence of the church, and heads turned instantly. Dozens of eyes landed on me. I had spent years avoiding eyes like these, shrinking away from judgment. But now I forced myself to stand taller. I drew a shaky breath. My voice came out rough, at first unused to carrying in a room so large. "I never wanted this," I said. The hush deepened. Even Hannah's sobs faltered. "I never wanted to ruin this day. I didn't even plan to be seen. I only wanted to watch my daughter smile, to see her happy." My voice cracked, but I kept going. The words were finally uncoiling after years of being trapped in my chest. I wasn't a perfect mother. I made mistakes, more than I care to admit. I worked too much. I missed moments I should have been there for, but I never stopped loving her. Not once. My eyes found Hannah streaked with mascara, her lips trembling. Love was the one thing I never failed at. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some women dabbed their eyes, men cleared their throats, shifting uncomfortably. The truth carried more weight in that church than all of Hannah's excuses. I swallowed hard, my chest aching. I didn't come here to fight. I came because I couldn't bear to let her walk into a new life while pretending I was dead, while pretending she had no one. My tears blurred the faces before me, but I didn't look away. I finally let them see me, let them hear me. I gave her what I could. It wasn't enough, not by the standards of this world, but it was everything I had. And if that made her ashamed, then I am sorry. But I will not apologize for loving her. The words poured out like a flood, unstoppable. My voice shook, but it did not break. Somewhere behind me, someone sniffled loudly. The sound triggered others, a chorus of quiet weeping, soft exhales, tissues rustling. I turned toward Hannah fully. You were my little girl, my everything. And even now, standing here, even with the words you've spoken, I love you. But I will not disappear for you, not anymore. The congregation was utterly still. Even Margaret, whose eyes had narrowed like sharpened glass, had nothing to say. Hannah's lips trembled. She looked at me with a mix of fury and something else I couldn't name, fear, perhaps, or regret. But she didn't speak. She couldn't. Daniel's eyes glistened. He nodded slightly toward me, a silent acknowledgement. The priest cleared his throat, his voice heavy with unease. Perhaps we should. But the words died in his mouth, because no one was looking at him. They were all still looking at me. And for the first time in years, I didn't shrink from their eyes. I met them one by one. I let them see me not as a ghost, not as a burden, not as a shame, but as a mother. Imperfect, flawed, but real. I sat back down slowly, my legs trembling, but my heart strangely lighter. The whispers didn't sting anymore. They weren't about me. They were about her. I had found my voice, and though it came too late to mend the rift between us, it wasn't too late to remind the world and myself that I was never nothing. When I sank back into the pew, the silence was deafening. My words still hung in the air, raw and unpolished, but alive. For once, it wasn't silence that suffocated me. It was silence that gave me breath. And then the spell broke. A man coughed awkwardly. Someone in the back stood and shuffled toward the aisle. Another followed. Chairs creaked as guests began to move, their voices hushed but restless. One by one they started to rise, gathering coats and clutching handbags, slipping out the heavy wooden doors of the church. The wedding was breaking apart. I watched in stunned stillness as the perfect scene Hannah had curated unraveled before her eyes. The white ribbons, the fresh lilies, the sunlight streaming through stained glass. All of it seemed like stage dressing now for a play that had ended before its first act. Margaret was the first to explode. She stood abruptly, the pearls at her throat rattling as she turned on Daniel. Her voice cracked like a whip. How dare you humiliate this family in public? Do you realize what you've done? You've ruined her reputation. You've ruined our name. Daniel didn't flinch. He looked at her with a weariness that seemed to hollow his face. Mother, stop. It isn't your name that's ruined. It's the truth that's come out. Margaret's face flushed crimson. She sputtered, grasping for words, her hands shaking with fury. You ungrateful boy. After everything I've done for you. But Daniel cut her off, his voice firm. You've done nothing but polish the surface and rot the core. I won't live like that, and I won't marry into lies. Gasps rippled through the remaining guests. Margaret staggered back as though he had struck her, her hand clutching the pearls at her chest. Her carefully constructed image, grace, dignity, control, had shattered in front of the very people she had spent years impressing. Hannah's voice sliced through next, shrill and broken. This is your fault. She pointed at me with shaking hands, her gown trembling around her legs. You selfish woman. You couldn't just let me have this one thing, could you? You had to drag me down with you. The accusation pierced me, but the sting was dulled by the way people looked at her now. No one nodded in agreement. No one whispered sympathy. The congregation had turned. I didn't respond. I simply watched her calm my tears drying on my cheeks. She screamed again, her voice cracking. "You ruined my life, you always have." Her words echoed shrill and hollow, the perfect bride undone by her own venom. Mascara streaked her face, her carefully curled hair now tangled her white dress blotched with sweat and tears. She was no longer radiant. She was raw, broken, unmasked. Daniel moved past her. He didn't yell. He didn't argue. He simply walked to me, his shoes clicking softly against the marble. When he reached my pew, he bent slightly, his voice low but steady. "Thank you," he whispered. I blinked at him, startled. "For what?" My voice came out hoarse. "For being here. For speaking. For not letting her erase you." His eyes were heavy with sorrow, but also relief. She needed to face this truth, and I needed to see it. I swallowed hard, unable to answer. My throat ached with too many unsaid words. He straightened, turning back toward the altar. Hannah was still sobbing Margaret at her side now, hissing into her ear, trying to soothe or scold, I couldn't tell. Guests filed past them, avoiding their eyes. The church that had once felt so full of celebration now felt cavernous, echoing with the remnants of tears and whispers. I sat still, calm now, as though the storm inside me had finally burned itself out. For years I had begged silently for my daughter to see me, and today in front of everyone she had shown her truth. It wasn't what I had prayed for, but it was the truth all the same. I glanced at her one last time. Her gown, once pristine, glowing under the stained glass, was now smeared with mascara and wrinkled from her fists. A vision of perfection undone. I felt no triumph, only grief. The wedding was over, and in its ashes, I sat quietly breathing at last, no longer invisible. The church had emptied into silence. The pews that once overflowed with guests now stood bare, their white ribbons, hanging limp petals scattered across the marble floor like remnants of a celebration that never happened. Hannah still knelt near the altar, sobbing into her hands. Margaret crouched beside her, whispering fiercely, trying to salvage what little control she could. Daniel stood a few steps away, his face carved with sorrow, the letter still clutched in his hand. But I no longer belonged in that room. I rose slowly, my knees weak, my body trembling with exhaustion. My purse slipped against my side as I stepped into the aisle. My shoes echoed across the marble, the sound startling in the cavernous emptiness. No one stopped me, not Hannah, not Margaret, not the priest. The heavy wooden doors groaned as I pushed them open, and then there was sunlight. It spilled across me like a warm flood, white and brilliant, washing away the shadows of the church. I paused on the steps, blinking against its brightness. The air outside was crisp, tinged with the scent of cut grass and distant lilacs. For the first time all day, I could breathe. I stood there for a moment, letting the light touch me. The bells in the tower above began to toll softly, not in triumph, not in celebration, but in a hollow echo that sounded more like an ending than a beginning. Behind me, muffled sobs drifted faintly through the doors. My daughter's wedding was over, and so was something inside me. I had come here longing to be invisible, to watch quietly from the shadows. But instead I had been pulled into the center of her life, her lies, her shame. And though it broke me, though it hollowed me out, I left with something I hadn't carried in years. Dignity. The truth had been spoken. I was no longer buried. The door creaked open behind me. I turned slightly, squinting into the light. Daniel stepped out. His tie loosened, his face drawn with weariness. He held the envelope of letters in one hand. He came to stand beside me. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. We simply stood in the sunlight, breathing. Finally, his voice broke the silence, low and hoarse. "You deserve to be there." The words cracked something inside me. My lips trembled, my throat tightening. "I don't know if I did," I whispered. He turned his eyes steady, unwavering. "You did. More than anyone." Tears blurred my vision again, hot and relentless. I nodded once, unable to form words. My hands shook at my sides, but the weight on my chest felt lighter. Daniel pressed the envelope into my hand. "Keep these. They're yours." His voice wavered. "She might never see them for what they are, but I do." I closed my fingers around the worn paper, my heart clenching. Those letters, my confessions, my apologies, my quiet declarations of love had been all I could give when my presence wasn't enough, and now returned to me, they felt heavier and lighter all at once. We stood there another moment, the bells still tolling faintly above us. Finally, Daniel exhaled. "I don't know what comes next for her. For me." His eyes flicked toward the church. "But I know you deserved more than what she gave you." I nodded again, swallowing hard. "Take care of yourself," I managed. He gave me a small, broken smile, then turned and walked down the steps, his figure shrinking as he moved away. I remained on the church steps, the sunlight warming my skin, my tears cooling on my cheeks. Behind me, the wedding was nothing but ashes. Ahead of me, the road stretched empty, uncertain. But I wasn't invisible anymore. I wasn't erased. And as I clutched the envelope to my chest, I realized something I had never allowed myself to believe. I had been enough all along.